Welcome to Root Cellar, an inquisitive look into sustainable food preservation and ancient wisdom for the modern world. We haven't done a proper foraging episode yet, and I figured what better way to broach the subject than the luxurious and elusive morel mushroom. I was introduced to morel mushrooms during a productive bachelor party, where instead of bar crawling in Vegas, we combed the forest floor for a weekend with a field guide who introduced us to the joys and challenges of this gourmet mushroom that can only be found foraging and not grown indoors like many of the other farm mushrooms on the market. Many chefs consider it one of their absolute favorite ingredients, and it's even known as a meat substitute due to its ability to fill the place of a good cut of chicken or pork in a dish. Today, we are going to talk to my morel-obsessed friend Colin, who continues to spend the better part of his spring and early summer combing through interior BC and Alberta for precious patches of morels. He's actively educating, picking, and researching morels all year round. He'll give you some great insights into the art of foraging and how to get started. Before we do, warning, mushrooms can be highly toxic, poisonous, and even lethal. I'm not proclaiming to be a mushroom expert, even though morels are one of the easier mushrooms to identify. Please consult an expert when identifying mushrooms. Let this episode instead be a guide on the art of foraging and a source of inspiration. Onwards. That's our host and chef, Joe Fantastic. Hi, we are here today with Calin Yablonski, a morel mushroom expert, and we're going to ask him a few questions about his experience over the last couple of years picking morels. How you doing, Colin?
I'm doing well, Tanner. It's a delight to be chatting with you about my favorite mushroom.
Yeah, so I was there when it all started, but for everyone else, why don't you kind of give us a recap of your history with morels?
Yeah, sure. So I started picking morels in Saskatchewan when I was a child. My family would go to some of the outcroppings of trees behind our house and pick what are called natural morels. So morels that just grow naturally in an area year after year, typically. And then I moved to Alberta in my early teens and hadn't really picked mushrooms up until, around my mid 30s. But I'd always wanted to go back out picking. So for my bachelor party, I got together two of my best friends and we went morel mushroom picking. And that was probably the most fun morel mushroom picking that I've ever done, because not only did I have my buddies with me, but we picked in a burn site. And that was really my introduction to picking morels the Canadian way, or the way that most people typically pick morels in Canada. While you can pick naturals, they tend to be in low supply, there's low quantities, whereas if you pick a burn site, so a site where there was a fire in the previous year, morels tend to flush in high quantities. And so we went out for about 2 or 3 days, ended up picking maybe 20 or 30 pounds each, and that sort of kicked things off.
So we know that morel mushrooms often pop up in the spring after a large wildfire in the area the previous year, but we don't have a lot of evidence why. There was a paper published in the Journal of Forest Ecology and Management, and it's one of the few reports documenting and analyzing the patterns of morel growth following a wildfire. The part of the mushroom you pick and eat is actually its fruit. Most of the fungi lives underground and is connected to the structure known as mycelium. But the fires tends to prompt the morel to fruit, but why that is still largely a mystery. So why morels? First off, I guess for anyone who's unfamiliar, kind of give us an explanation and what's your fascination with this particular type of fungi?
Yeah, so morels are an interesting mushroom for a number of reasons. First and foremost, they're a gourmet mushroom. So There are a limited number of gourmet mushrooms that you can forage naturally. The Kootenays, where I live now, tends to be a great region for that. So is southern Alberta and northern Alberta. But the reason that I really love morels is number one, you can't grow them. So you can't cultivate them or farm them like other types of mushrooms like button or portobello. So you can only really forage them. So I thought that was amazing. And then number two, they're just my favorite mushrooms. So in terms of taste and flavor, they kind of have this earthy, woody, natural taste to them. And so they're great in dips and stews and in cream cheese dishes and things like that. So for those two reasons, I really enjoyed it. And then in addition, it's just so cool if you've never picked in a burn site before to go to one because it's almost a little bit spooky. It feels kind of like a tree graveyard because you're walking through these enormous forests of burnt trees, and you really come to respect how hot these fires get. Because in some cases, you'll have root systems that have been completely burnt out where the fire's been so hot that it'll burn deep into the ground. And what's cool is that in some cases, if you look inside those deep holes, you'll actually find mushrooms growing within them. So, I mean, that's a couple of reasons. I just enjoy the mushroom. I like cooking with it. It's fun to pick. Picking morel mushrooms is really like adult Easter egg hunting. Like it's so much fun. You get to walk around in the forest. You can listen to some music, and if you're in a good spot, you're going to be busy for the whole day.
And what's kind of the current, we'll call it street value of of morel mushrooms? Is it an expensive mushroom?
The street value, yeah, so it would be one of the more expensive gourmet mushrooms that's picked in Canada. I believe the most expensive is matsutake mushrooms, also known as a pine mushroom. But they tend to be in much lower supply as compared to a morel. A morel will typically sell fresh if you're buying it by the pound for about $25, depending on the year. In some years, it'll be a little bit lower if there's a lot of supply. In other years, it'll be a bit higher if there's limited supply. So it's in that ballpark if you're buying them fresh, and then if you're buying the morels dried, which a lot of people will dry their morels to preserve them as well as sell them. You're looking at around $20 to $25 per 20 grams. So somewhere in that ballpark, which translates to, if my math is right, anywhere from $200 to $400 per pound.
Cool. So how do you start? Where do you if you were to go start your morel picking season for 2024, where are you looking? How are you kind of planning that, what that season will look like and when it will start?
Yeah, good question. So usually I start planning in the winter time. So come December, I will be looking at burn maps, so fire maps provided by the government of Canada to show where the previous season's burns were. And it's important that fire morels will grow in abundance typically the year following a burn. So if there's a burn in August, you can go and pick it typically in the next year in, say, May or June, something like that. So usually I start with scouting these burn maps to see where the previous burns were. And then I look at the locations. Oftentimes you'll find areas that are more conducive to the conditions needed for morels to grow. So you're looking for really thick trees. Typically you want some spruce, you want some pine trees. If you have things like cedar trees are excellent as well. So if those types of trees are in that area and they've burnt, usually you're going to have great flushes of mushrooms. And then I'm also looking for things like elevation. So the ground temperature for morels to grow has to be somewhere between 8 and 10 degrees, we believe, somewhere in that area. And so how morels will grow is they'll start fruiting at lower elevations, and then incrementally, as the temperature warms up, they'll just fruit higher and higher and higher. So I'm looking at those factors to sort of plan my picks. And then come mid-April to early May, I'll start to go out and scout my sites. And so morel picking takes a lot more planning and effort than a lot of people think. They assume that you can just drive out to a spot and you'll immediately find mushrooms. Last year, for example, I scouted 3 or 4 locations for about 2 or 3 weeks prior to actually finding morels. And during those scouting expeditions, I was putting on anywhere from maybe 2 kilometers up to around 10 kilometers in a day, just looking through different locations. So it does take a little bit of time, energy, and effort to do the upfront planning and then the scouting. But once you find a patch, assuming that the conditions are right, you know that you can pick there for a few weeks as we go through the spring and into early summer.
So, what's your goal this year? I've heard talks of um, upwards of 100 pounds as a personal goal. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm looking for at least 100 pounds this year. The morels don't last very long in my household. So last year, picking casually, I think we did 60, 70 pounds, my wife and I. So we dry most of them, give a lot of them away. But I think 100 pounds would keep us, consistently supplied with morels until next season comes around.
And so, how many have you picked in a day before? What's the jackpot look like for you?
Jackpot. So a jackpot for me is going to be very different than for other people. I've picked maybe 20 to 30 pounds in a day, somewhere in that ballpark. But I have other pickers, people who I've connected with online, who have picked over 100 pounds in just one day. And so if you get on ground that is, in a flushing area with perfect conditions where there's really dense morels, you can pick tens of pounds in a day easily. So, but I'm hoping that I can do 20 to 30 pounds a day and that it doesn't take me more than, 5 or 6 days to get my buckets filled.
That's great. Do you have any kind of resources that you could point people in the direction of for someone that kind of wants to maybe go out there this year and try it out for the first time?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place to look is Facebook. Facebook has a number of morel mushroom picking groups, and they tend to be provincial. So I live in BC right now. I'm a member of multiple morel mushroom picking groups. What's nice about being part of these groups is that you can make connections and have people in different areas who are scouting locations that just wouldn't be feasible for you to drive to. And then they'll let you know when you do the same, and then you can share that information so that you can go and join them picking if you choose to. So Facebook is the number one resource, and then there's a few other websites online that show where there are recorded morel mushroom sightings. And I can't recall the domain name off the top of my head, but if you Google morel mushroom sightings, it'll show the mushrooms and the dates with which they're picked, so that you can see the gradual movement from southern United States up to Canada, which is just interesting to see.
Cool. And one final question for you. So, I know you mentioned the burn sites and this connection to, the fire season. I know that can be a tragic thing and it can be overwhelming. In Alberta here, we experience and BC and all across Canada, a terrible wildfire season last year. But looking at the silver lining, does that mean that this is going to be potentially an exceptional mushroom season?
Yes, and you're right. I mean, it's always bittersweet for me because when I hear that there's a forest fire, I'm sad because I know what that means for the environment, and then part of me is also excited because I know what that means for mushrooms. So it's this interesting duality that I have to deal with within my own psyche. But yes, so especially northern Alberta and northern BC, there are enormous swaths of land that were someone to travel to and pick in. I'm sure, as I said to one of the people on the forum the other day, that if you drove up there with a semi-trailer, you'd be coming home with it full.
And so, being that most of these episodes have been filmed in Lethbridge, for someone from Lethbridge that might be interested in kind of going up to one of those burn sites, what time period would they potentially look for to access those?
Yeah, so we start to see mushrooms popping up on the West Coast, so in Victoria or on the island, all through lower mainland BC. Right now, actually, so early to mid-April. This season appears to be earlier, just because it's been unseasonably warm throughout the winter months. And so typically you're looking anywhere from early May up until mid to late June. That's the typical period that you're picking within. Usually mid-May is a pretty safe period. And people often will say, as soon as the lilacs start to bloom on trees, that's when you know that the conditions are right for morels to grow as well.
That's a good tip to go by. Well,
Yeah.
there you have it, folks. Lots of good information from a newbie, but an expert nonetheless. And Colin, best of luck on that 100-pound goal. I think the conditions are in your favor this year.
Thanks, pal. Well, I'm going to have some good help supporting me this year. So I look forward to filling them buckets.
Beautiful. Well, we'll let you get at it and get back to your research.
Thanks, Tanner.